She was my best friend since childhood. I trusted her with everything, even the keys to our home. So when I was in the hospital giving birth to our daughter, I thought she was helping my husband cope. I didn't know she was helping herself to my marriage. This is a story of betrayal at the most vulnerable moment of my life. Part 1. Labor and Lies. There's something magical about expecting your first child. That blend of fear and excitement, of wondering how everything will change and secretly believing nothing could ever shake the life you've built. I was 8 months pregnant when Lily, my childhood best friend, lost her apartment in a sudden breakup. She called me in tears. My first instinct wasn't to ask questions, it was to open our door. "Stay with us," I said, hand resting on my swollen belly, "at least until you're on your feet." My husband Mark agreed with a smile. He even carried her bags in. Looking back, I remember that smile differently now, not as kindness, as performance. Lily had been a constant in my life since kindergarten. We had matching Halloween costumes, cried over the same boys in high school, and moved to the same city after college. She knew everything about me. The songs that made me cry, the way I liked my tea, the exact moment I first fell for Mark. When I introduced her to him, she joked, "If you don't marry him, I will." I laughed back then. Lily was supposed to be family. The final weeks of my pregnancy were hard. My feet were swollen, my back ached constantly, and I was anxious about labor. Mark picked up extra work hours to prepare for the baby. Lily helped cook, cleaned the house, even rubbed my shoulders. She was my rock while I waddled through contractions. But sometimes, I'd walk in from the bathroom and find them sitting too close, laughing a little too hard. I'd catch Lily watching him when she thought I wasn't looking. I brushed it off. Hormones, I told myself. Jealousy. Insecurity. She would never. He would never. The night I went into labor, Mark was surprisingly calm, almost too calm. We rushed to the hospital. 23 hours later, after pushing through exhaustion and fear, I held our daughter in my arms, red-faced and screaming, tiny fingers wrapped around mine. I looked at Mark through tears. "She's perfect." He nodded. He was already on his phone. He left after a few hours, saying he needed to shower and grab a few things. I didn't think much of it. I was overwhelmed, bleeding, stitched, and barely conscious. He texted later, "Back soon, love you." He didn't return until morning. What I didn't know was that while I lay in a hospital room recovering from childbirth, Mark went home, to Lily. What happened that night was never meant to be discovered. But betrayal has a scent, a timing, a pattern. And soon, the pieces would begin to fall into place. Part 2. Cracks in the Cradle. When Mark finally returned the next morning, I was bleary-eyed and clutching our baby in a fog of exhaustion. He kissed my forehead like nothing had happened and handed me a lukewarm coffee. "They were out of almond milk," he said, smiling. I wanted to believe that was the biggest disappointment of my day. Lily texted me that afternoon. "Can't wait to meet her. So happy for you both." There were no photos on her social media, no mention of us, the baby, the birth. That was odd. She documented everything. But again, I gave her grace. She was grieving a breakup. Maybe it was painful for her to see me with a full family. I tried not to overthink it, but overthinking is something new mothers do best. I noticed Mark wouldn't leave his phone unattended, not even to change a diaper. When I'd doze off, I'd hear faint vibrations at night, messages, always turned face down, always locked. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself I was healing and hormonal. But then, one night while Mark was in the shower and our daughter finally asleep, his phone lit up on the dresser. A message from Elle. It read, "I still can't stop thinking about last night." I froze. My body went cold. My heartbeat drowned out every sound in the room. I stared at the name. Elle. Not Lily, not even a full name. Just an initial, like a dirty little secret. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The pieces clicked into place faster than I could stop them. The long showers, the late returns, the way they joked too closely, how her hand lingered on his shoulder when she said goodnight. I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking, rocking back and forth slightly as my daughter stirred beside me. I was afraid she could feel it, the storm breaking in me. My milk let down from stress, my stitches ached, and yet it was my heart that hurt most. When Mark came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, I stared at him. He didn't notice at first. He picked up his phone, saw the screen, paused. "What's this?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer. He just stared at me like I was a stranger. "You slept with her," I said. "Didn't you?" Silence. It was the silence that confirmed it. The next 10 minutes were a blur. His stumbling half-apology, the pathetic denials, the phrase, "it was a mistake," repeated like a prayer to a God I no longer believed in. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't throw anything. I picked up my daughter, I held her close, and I said, "You need to leave." He started to argue, saying I was tired, that we could talk later, that it didn't mean anything. I didn't respond, because when someone betrays you at your most fragile, when you're cut open to give life and they choose death for your trust, there's no room left for conversation. I stayed up all night rocking my baby, and I started to think about what came next, for me, for her, and for the version of me that had just died. Part 3. The friend who knew too much. The morning after I asked Mark to leave, the house felt both hollow and heavy. Every creak of the floorboards, every soft breath from my daughter in her bassinet reminded me that I was now navigating this alone. But it wasn't just the betrayal of a husband I had to face. It was hers, Lily, my best friend since childhood, my confidant, the one who stood beside me as I said my vows, the woman who helped pick out the wallpaper for the nursery and cried when I told her we were expecting. She knew everything, my fears, my dreams, my insecurities. She knew how I feared being abandoned, and then she handed my worst fear a bed in my own home. I didn't text her that morning. I wanted to see her face, to look her in the eye and ask, "How could you?" I strapped my daughter into her car seat, drove the familiar streets to Lily's apartment, the one we helped her decorate after her breakup, the one I helped her move into 6 months ago when she claimed she had nowhere else to go. She answered the door in leggings and a tank top, her hair pulled into a messy bun, coffee in hand. She smiled like nothing was wrong, like we were still best friends. "Hey, I was just about to text," she started, but her voice faltered when she saw the look on my face. "Can we talk?" I asked. She stepped aside. "Yeah, of course, come in." I left my daughter sleeping in the carrier beside me on the couch. Lily sat across from me, knees pulled to her chest, avoiding my eyes. I didn't want to waste words. "I know," I said, "about you and Mark." For a moment, she didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stared at me, expressionless, like she hadn't heard me right. And then she smiled, a small, tragic smile, the kind you give when the truth finally breathes and there's no stuffing it back in. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. I felt something fracture in my chest. "How long?" I asked. She hesitated. "It started around the baby shower, my baby shower. The day I stood beside her in a soft pink dress, swollen with life, surrounded by love, and she was already sleeping with my husband. I felt like I was watching someone else's life unravel in front of me." "Was it just once?" She shook her head slowly. "No." I nodded. Not because I understood, but because something in me gave up trying. "I loved you," I said, my voice cracking. "I would have given you everything." "I was lonely," she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You had this whole new life, and he was there, and he listened, and I was so—" "No," I interrupted. "You don't get to make yourself the victim. Not here. Not with me." She collapsed into sobs, muttering apologies that meant nothing anymore. "I don't hate you," I said quietly, "but I'll never trust you again, and I can't have you in my life. Or hers." I stood up, lifted my daughter into my arms, and left. That walk from Lily's apartment to the car felt like miles. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just held my daughter close and whispered promises into her tiny ear. "You will never know betrayal like this. I'll protect you. I'll show you strength." Back home, the silence was thick. But it wasn't the same kind of silence anymore. It wasn't fear. It wasn't heartbreak. It was the beginning of healing. Because once the lies are gone, the only thing left is truth. And I was finally facing mine. Part 4. The man who thought he could come back. It had been 2 weeks since I watched Mark walk out the door, with nothing but a duffel bag and a look of disbelief. Since then, the silence in our home had turned from suffocating to sacred. It was mine now. Mine and my daughter's. No secrets hidden behind kisses. No lies lurking in the shadows. Just the sound of lullabies at 2 a.m., the hum of the baby monitor, and the slow, unfamiliar rhythm of single motherhood. I had started to heal. A little. Enough to stand up without shaking. Enough to stop checking my phone for messages that never came. Enough to start journaling again. Even if it was just angry scribbles and broken thoughts on tear-stained pages. Then he showed up. It was a Saturday. Gray clouds blanketed the sky, and the air held the kind of chill that sinks into your bones. I was in the middle of folding laundry when the doorbell rang. My stomach dropped, not in fear, but in exhaustion. I already knew it was him. No one else would be that bold. I opened the door. There he was. Mark, in jeans and a hoodie, hair unkempt, eyes bloodshot. He looked like a ghost of the man I married, like the affair had drained something vital from him too. "I just want to talk," he said. I didn't invite him in. I stepped outside, pulled the door half closed behind me. "Say what you came to say." He blinked, swallowed, struggled. "I made a mistake," he said. I let the words sit between us, cold, pointless. He went on. "Lily, she was a distraction, a mistake. You're my life, you and the baby. I lost my way. I want to fix this." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how rehearsed it sounded. How easy it was for him to say the words now that his secret wasn't secret anymore. "You want to fix this?" I said. "With what? Glue, tape, lies, and late-night apologies?" He flinched. "I never stopped loving you." "Love isn't the issue, Mark. Loyalty is. Respect, honor. And you didn't just betray me. You did it while I was bringing our daughter into the world." Tears welled in his eyes, but they didn't move me. "I panicked," he whispered. "I didn't know how to be a father. I didn't know how to be enough for you." I stepped back. "So you decided to be enough for my best friend instead?" Silence. "You think this is just about an affair?" I asked. "It's about cowardice. You chose the easy way out. You ran from discomfort straight into someone else's bed." He looked like he wanted to fall to his knees, like the weight of his own actions was just now settling in. "I want to come home," he said. "Please." Home. That word used to mean safety, partnership, a warm bed and laughter and shared pain. Now, home was me, standing on the porch with fire in my spine and a child inside who would never be touched by his kind of betrayal. "You don't live here anymore," I said. "Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. You forfeited that right." His breath hitched. "So that's it?" I nodded. "That's it." He turned slowly, walking back down the steps, shoulders hunched like he was carrying bricks of regret. But regret is cheap when it's too late. I went back inside, closed the door, locked it, not out of fear but clarity. Later that night, I held my daughter in the rocking chair and stared at the ceiling. I whispered, "You will grow up knowing that strength isn't staying with someone who breaks you. It's walking away and choosing yourself." Part 5. When the truth hits the light. There's something deceptive about silence. It feels like protection, like peace. But silence is just a pause, and eventually the truth fills it, loudly, violently. 3 days after Mark stood on my porch begging to return, I got a call from Erica, a mutual friend, someone from our old college circle who had recently moved back to town. I hadn't spoken to her in months, not since before the baby. But her voice was tight and frantic. "I didn't know who else to call," she said. "Have you seen what Lily posted?" My breath caught. "What?" "She made a post about Mark, about everything." I didn't need more than that. I opened my phone, went to Lily's profile, and there it was, a picture of her curled in Mark's hoodie, belly just barely showing with the caption, "Not how we planned it, but love always finds its way." Starting a new chapter, just the three of us. I didn't feel my legs give out, but I must have sunk to the floor because the next thing I knew, my phone was in my lap and the baby was stirring in her crib across the room. My hands were ice, pregnant. She was pregnant. The comments were a war zone, some congratulating her, some asking if this was the same Mark who was happily married a few months ago, others tagging me with shocked emojis and question marks. I didn't respond. I didn't post. I didn't scream or cry or throw my phone across the room. I just existed in a kind of numbness that only comes when your soul takes a direct hit. He had known. That night he came to the house, begging for forgiveness. He already knew she was pregnant, and he still said it was a mistake, still said he wanted to fix us. The audacity didn't even surprise me anymore. It exhausted me. I sat in that silence for hours, not thinking, just breathing, until something shifted. I walked to my laptop, opened a blank document, and I began to write. Not a message to Mark, not a response to Lily, not a call out to the world. I wrote my story, the truth, or raw and unfiltered, how I had taken Lily in when she was down, how I trusted her with my life, my home, and my marriage, how Mark had left me emotionally while I was pregnant, then physically on the day I gave birth. How betrayal didn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it tiptoed in, smiled, and sat at your dinner table. I hit post, and the internet exploded. Messages poured in, some from strangers who had gone through the same thing. Some from friends who admitted they always had a strange feeling about Lily. Some from women who said, "You told my story." I didn't write it for attention. I wrote it to reclaim my voice, to speak in the space where I'd once kept quiet. And in doing so, I shattered the silence Mark and Lily thought they could hide behind. Mark called the next day. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, something about damage control and not painting him as a villain. Too late. The paint was dry, and he wasn't a villain because I said so. He was a villain because of what he did. Lily didn't call. She never would. She was too proud, or too afraid, maybe both. But 2 weeks later, I heard from her fiancé. Yes, fiancé. Apparently, before Mark, there was another man, the man she was supposed to marry, the man she left for something real. He messaged me, "Thank you." I thought I was the only one. And just like that, I realized something powerful. Betrayal doesn't isolate you. It connects you to others who've been burned by the same kind of fire. And in that, there's strength. That night, I took my daughter outside. We watched the sky shift from dusk to deep velvet. I held her against my chest and whispered, "You will never believe you have to stay small to be loved. Not in my house, not in your life." Because the truth had come out, and I hadn't just survived it, I owned it. Part 6. His kingdom crumbles. In the weeks that followed my post, I learned just how powerful truth can be. Not because it screams, but because it endures. Like water eroding stone, my silence had protected them. But once I spoke, the mask Mark wore began to crack. And not even his carefully crafted charm could save him. It started subtly. A client of his, a woman who had seen my post because her sister shared it, canceled her contract with his firm. Then another, and then a third. Mark had always worked in PR, managing image and reputation for influencers, small brands, and public figures. His entire livelihood depended on perception. And perception, once tainted, is hard to clean. He called me again, this time not to apologize, not even to manipulate. He was angry. "You're ruining me," he said, voice tight with panic and fury. "You don't know what this is doing to my career." I stayed calm. "No, Mark," I said. "You did that. I just told the truth." He cursed under his breath. "You're spiteful." I almost laughed. Spite? I had held in the truth for months. I had let him walk away without consequence while raising our daughter alone. If anything, I had been too merciful. And now, reality was simply doing what reality does, catching up. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to watch him burn, but life had other plans. About a month after the post, I got a call from one of Mark's former co-workers, a woman named June. We had never spoken before, but she said, "I think you deserve to know something." She told me that Lily wasn't the first, that during our marriage, Mark had entertained at least 2 other women, always women who admired him, looked up to him. One of them had even quit after things got weird. I thanked her. I don't know why I didn't cry. Maybe I had already cried all those tears in advance without knowing it. It didn't devastate me. It clarified things. Mark hadn't made one mistake. He was a pattern. And I had been his camouflage, the sweet, loyal wife, the baby, the house. I had helped him look safe, honest, stable. That image was a shield, and behind it, he did whatever he pleased. But now the image was broken, and the shield was gone. By the end of the month, he was laid off from his firm. Quietly, no scandal. Just a statement about restructuring. His Instagram, once full of curated family photos, inspirational quotes, and carefully filtered images, went dark. Last I checked, his account was gone entirely. As for Lily, I heard she moved back in with her parents. Rumors spread that the pregnancy wasn't as joyful as she'd made it seem, that she had hoped for a different ending, one where Mark chose her fully, not out of necessity. But she had chosen destruction, and now she was living in it. And me? I was rebuilding. Every day still hurt in small ways. The way I'd reach for 2 mugs in the morning before remembering it was just me. The way I'd catch a glimpse of our wedding photo now tucked in a drawer and feel that old ache. But the weight was getting lighter. I was going back to work soon, not out of desperation, but choice. I wanted to feel like myself again, not just a survivor, not just a mother. Me. I started writing more, not just my story, but others. Stories about women who had lost themselves and found their fire. stories about heartbreak and healing. I published them anonymously online, and the messages that came back were like mirrors. Women saying, "This is me, I see myself in you." And I thought, maybe this pain wasn't wasted. Maybe it had purpose. One evening, I was holding my daughter, now giggling at shadows on the wall, when I whispered, "He didn't break me. He just showed me what I needed to leave." Because some truths don't come to ruin us. They come to free us. Part 7. The door that finally closed spring came late that year. But when it arrived, it felt like permission, like the world was slowly waking up again. And I was too. By now, Mark had gone quiet. The calls had stopped. His presence had vanished from social media, and our only communication was through a shared custody app. Even those messages were short, stiff, almost robotic. He visited our daughter once a week, polite, distant, sometimes distracted. I watched him struggle to be the father he pretended he'd always wanted to be. And I realized something important. I wasn't jealous anymore. I wasn't angry. I was indifferent. That's when I knew. The wound had closed. But something unexpected happened next. A local magazine reached out. The editor had come across one of my anonymous essays and said it hit harder than anything they'd published in months. She asked if I'd like to contribute a column, monthly. Paid? Me? A columnist? I nearly said no. Self-doubt always whispered first. But then I thought of everything I had survived. If I could survive betrayal, abandonment, and rebuilding from the ashes, surely I could write a few hundred honest words a month. So I said yes. The first article was titled, "The Kind of Silence That Screams." I didn't name names. I didn't have to. It wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. It was about the invisible bruises women carry from words never spoken, from glances that meant too much, from loyalties shattered behind closed doors. It went viral in less than a week. And with it came offers, speaking events, interviews, a book agent. I had once been the woman who couldn't speak up. Now I was standing on a stage telling my story to rooms filled with women and some men who needed to hear it, who needed someone to say, "You're not crazy, you're not weak, and you are not alone." And then, months later, I got the message from Lily, a long one, apologetic, emotional, rambling. She said she was sorry, that she thought she loved him, but now realized he only loved himself, that she was overwhelmed, scared, and alone, that she never meant to hurt me, that she missed our friendship. She wanted closure. I didn't respond, not out of spite, but because closure doesn't come from the person who broke you. It comes when you no longer need their words to feel whole. Instead, I opened a new notebook and began a fresh story, one not rooted in betrayal or pain, but in strength. Later that night, I sat by the window, our daughter asleep in my arms, breathing softly. I stared out at the city lights and thought of the woman I used to be, the one who smiled through pain, who apologized for being too emotional, who forgave too quickly. She was gone now. In her place stood someone new, someone braver, bolder, a woman not built from love alone, but from loss, grit, and survival. And as I looked at my daughter, I whispered something I needed her to know. You come from strength. And no matter what the world tells you, you are never too much, never too broken, and never too small to rise. That night, I didn't dream of the past. I dreamed of everything ahead. Part 8. The Life I Reclaimed. It's strange how grief transforms, how the sharp sting dulls into something quieter. It never quite disappears, but it no longer commands the room. That's how I felt now. Not broken, not angry, not even sad. Just free. A year had passed since I walked out of that hospital room with my daughter in my arms and my heart in pieces. 12 months of questions, pain, growth, and slow, stubborn healing. I'd moved us into a smaller apartment. It was nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, and sunlight that flooded the kitchen every morning. But it was ours. No ghosts, no lies, just peace. The job at the magazine turned into a full-time opportunity. My column, Unquiet, gained thousands of readers. Each week, I received letters from women, some young, some much older, who thanked me for saying what they couldn't yet say themselves. You gave me the courage to leave. You reminded me that my voice matters. You helped me feel seen. I kept every one of those letters in a box by my bed. On nights when doubt crept in, I'd reread a few. They reminded me that pain can be useful, if it's given purpose. As for Mark, his visits with our daughter grew fewer and fewer. He missed 2 in a row, then 3. No explanation, just silence. And this time I didn't chase answers. I told myself if a man can't fight for his daughter, I'm done fighting for space in his priorities. Eventually, I filed to revise custody, sole legal, full physical. It wasn't revenge, it was responsibility. She deserved consistency. Love that showed up. It was granted without protest. The day the papers were signed, I walked out of the courthouse and felt something lift off my chest, a weight I'd carried for years, invisible, heavy, made of guilt, of hope, of lies I told myself to survive. Gone. And with it, I made a promise to never again shrink myself for someone else's comfort, to never again mistake loyalty for self-abandonment, to never again confuse quiet for peace. That evening, I took my daughter to the park. She ran through the grass, giggling at ducks in the pond, her curls bouncing with every step. I sat on a bench watching her, the setting sun painting gold across her cheeks. And I smiled, a real, full smile, for the first time in what felt like forever. Not because life was perfect, but because it was real, honest, ours. I met someone a few months later. No grand romance, no whirlwind, just coffee that turned into conversation, and conversation that turned into long walks and easy laughter. He wasn't trying to impress me, he listened. And when I told him everything, the whole story, he didn't flinch. He said, "Thank you for trusting me with this. We're taking it slow. I'm in no rush to define it, but I know this. Whatever comes next, I'm entering it whole. Not the version of me that stayed quiet, not the one who begged to be enough, but the woman who walked through fire and came out holding her child, her truth, and her future. Because the greatest revenge isn't anger, it's joy. It's rebuilding a life so full and so peaceful that those who broke you can't enter it anymore, not even as shadows. And that, more than anything, is the life I reclaimed." The end.